Hi everyone, welcome back to the Moying podcast. I'm trying something a little bit new here today where I'm going to discuss a podcast episode that I recently listened to. A podcast by Andrew Huberman. His podcast is called Huberman Lab for anyone who's interested, and the episode title was called Using Failures, Movement, and Balance to Learn Faster. It was such a great episode, very eye-opening. And in this episode of Moying, we'll be discussing the insights that I got from the Huberman Lab podcast about using these failures, movements, and balance to learn faster and how we can apply them to our Muay Thai training. Andrew Huberman, he releases a lot of podcast episodes applying science to like real life. And here, I guess I'm taking it a step further in applying it to our Muay Thai training and not just real life. One of the main takeaways from the episode was you have to embrace failure to improve. When it comes to Muay Thai, we face a lot of setbacks, whether it's not being able to do a technique properly, or losing a fight, or failing to reach a certain training goal. It's so easy to just get discouraged and feel like you want to give up or like you suck. But believe it or not, failure is actually essential to learning. Right? You can't learn without failing. For those who tend to fail a lot, it's okay. I'm one of those people as well. Muay Thai does not come easy to me, even though I've been more or less athletic my entire life, running around on sports teams and things like that. I'm not a natural fighter, and a lot of new techniques, especially when it comes to drilling, it takes a really long time and a lot of repetition for it to really stick into my head to do it naturally during training, and maybe even 2 to 3 times more than that to do it in a fight. All right. So when we fail, it's an opportunity to learn what we did wrong and how we can improve based on those mistakes. The key is to not let failure define us, and you have to keep pushing forward despite that. For example, if you're having trouble with a certain technique, giving up after a few failed attempts will just halt the learning process, right? Instead, you can break down the technique into smaller parts that push you out of your comfort zone but are very, very doable. And then you practice each part individually and then you put them all together. So think about the first time you learned how to kick, right? So there's a lot of steps to learning how to kick. You got to step your foot out this way, you got to turn the hips, you got to turn your shoulder, you got to throw your arm out, you got to put your other hand up, right? And if you're part of the very small population that can get this all in one go in your very first class, good for you, but chances are you're not. So how did you learn how to kick? First, you learn how to step with your foot properly, right? Step with your foot properly, and then you focused on bringing your leg up, and then you focused on turning your hips, and then you focused on keeping your hands up and throwing the other hand up, right? Step by step by step by step. In your very first class, it's very overwhelming to try all these things at once, especially if you have zero martial arts training experience and you're learning like a completely new movement, right? Like throwing a kick is not a natural body movement. A natural body movement would be something like walking. So anyway, embracing failure as part of the learning process, you can actually accelerate your learning in Muay Thai. An interesting point that he made, Huberman Lab podcast, the point he made about dopamine. So dopamine is a hormone secreted within your brain, and it's associated with feelings of pleasure, right? So then when you eat your favorite food, there's like a certain amount of dopamine being released. When you hang out with certain people, there's a certain amount of dopamine being released. And even though there's feelings of pleasure associated with this, there's also dopamine is also a huge factor as to why certain drugs are more addictive than others. So you've probably heard of the drug dope. This is why. So certain drugs, they trigger like a smaller release of dopamine, and then other drugs trigger a huge release of dopamine. So then when people talk about chasing this high, they're chasing that dopamine release that comes with taking the drugs for that very first time. Pleasure aside, dopamine is also a hormone that's related to motivation. If something pleases you more, you're more motivated to seek out that action or seek out that thing. How can we relate to this with embracing failure? So a lot of it has to do with how you react to failing. And Andrew Huberman talks about how you can actually manipulate the dopamine release so you can really embrace failure on a chemical level. So when you do fail, think about how it's a great thing, right? Enjoy this process of failing. And the more you think that it's a great thing, and the more you focus as, okay, so there's this to learn, and this is my way of getting better. The more you associate the positive aspects of failing, so some of the aspects that I outlined among many others, you will trigger a dopamine release, right? And a lot of studies have shown that people who are very good at this, who really get this dopamine high from failing and learning, they become extremely successful at whatever it is they do. So you can apply this to your Muay Thai. The next time you don't get something, instead of giving up or telling yourself that you suck, think to yourself, oh wow, this is awesome. This is awesome because this is giving me the opportunity to learn. And this is giving me the opportunity to learn through so many ways. So that's a little, I guess, biohack in a way to embrace the suck. Another point, incorporating movement and balance when it comes to the process of learning. In Muay Thai, movement and balance are essential for executing techniques efficiently and effectively. When you incorporate specific movement and balance training into your Muay Thai, we can improve our overall performance. It's no news to anyone that balance is extremely important to Muay Thai because you're standing on one leg for a lot of the things that you're doing. But even if you're standing on two legs on the ground, some people lose their balance. So when you incorporate balance exercises like standing on one leg or using a balancing board into either your S&C routine or just as something you do for a few minutes every day, you can really trigger the points in your brain that help facilitate learning new things. So you can work on movement drills like footwork or the agility ladder to improve your speed and coordination. And by focusing on this, in addition to technique training, you can become more well-rounded and improve your overall performance. TLDR, movements are very, very good for learning. And when it comes to Muay Thai, it's very easy to incorporate those two. Another point is to be mindful and present in your training. You don't want to just go through the motions when you show up to training. The instructor can tell you to do jab, cross, hook, and if you're just extending your arms just to get the round over with, you're going to get way less out of those 2-3 minutes than if you focused on what you're doing and really put intention into each of those punches, right? So like, okay, how can I throw this jab better? How can I put more power into that cross? Am I making sure that I'm turning my foot and my hip and my shoulder on that hook, right? It's very easy to get distracted or lose focus, especially during long training sessions. But by being present and mindful, you can maximize your training and accelerate learning. One way to be mindful is to focus on your breath during training and also focus on each strike as it comes, even during long combinations or pad work. Focus on doing each thing as best as you can, and by paying attention, you can stay calm, you can stay focused, even though the training sessions can be very high intensity. If you give your full attention to the present moment, you can improve your performance and accelerate your learning that way. And saying that, it's all of a sudden becomes very obvious that this takeaway can be used in things other than just Muay Thai. The next point, don't be afraid to ask for help. In training, it's common to feel like asking for help is a sign of weakness. Especially when it comes to big group classes, you might feel like you're imposing upon an instructor for them to take a couple minutes to ask something like, hey, can you please check that my technique is good and give me some feedback, right? In a group of 20, 30 people or even more, it might be a little bit intimidating to ask the instructor of that. But in reality, seeking help is a form of strength and it can really accelerate your learning. So you don't join a Muay Thai gym because you think you already know everything, right? Or you know how to do everything correctly. You're joining for the classes. Yes, you're getting a workout in, but also to learn. And you're going to be more likely to pick one place over another because the instructors are more knowledgeable, or if you feel like you could learn or get more out of it, right? So if you're struggling with a technique or need help with a specific aspect of your training, don't be afraid to ask whoever's teaching or even your training partner for help. If you learn to let go of your ego and realize that working together with your teammates and your coach and seeking guidance can become strengths, you can improve faster and reach your training goals more quickly. Of course, this doesn't mean bombard your coach or your training partner every other second to ask them for help. Ask them for help with one thing, concentrate on it, and then when it's appropriate, when you feel like you've exhausted their advice for that one thing, like you've done it over and over and over, you can ask them for more feedback on the same thing or something else. If you're at the extreme of where you're not asking for any help, try asking for help, just, one piece of advice every training session, right? Just one. We discussed a lot of the insights for the Huberman Lab podcast, and I encourage everyone in Muay Thai to look into data-backed methods and continue educating yourself through the endless resources that are available online, podcasts, YouTube, social media. When we know better, we can do better, we can stop following bad advice, right? A lot of times we get bad advice from people who mean well. And the only reason why they're spreading this bad advice is because this is what their coaches told them. And for their coaches, this is what their coaches told them, and so on and so forth. When we know better, we can pass on better information, and we can stop doing things old school for the sake of doing things old school, and we can stop spreading false or even potentially harmful beliefs. So I hope you found this episode helpful, and if you'd like me to cover more insights on the things that I listen to or the content I digest and how I would apply it to Muay Thai training, please give me feedback somehow. Either comment on this podcast episode or drop a line on social media. This is Angela Chang, and I'll see you in the next episode.